Gentlemen, I give you Katrina.
I have to say that the vampires in the 70s, how did they wash their clothes when they were sleeping in a coffin all the time? Did Chris Lee, I mean, when he turned up to seduce women with the stare and doing all that, it'd be like, you know, man, you need to wash your clothes. And then came the 80s.
And now, our feature presentation.
Did you ever have one of those nights?
Hey, where are we going? Doesn't matter. What counts is that you're my buddy.
My day didn't start off too well.
We be looking for ya.
Are we jumpy tonight?
And then it got worse.
We're here.
And then...
Gentlemen, I give you Katrina.
You're just what I'm looking for. Why'd you pick on us?
It was a mistake. It was a little error there, a little communication error. I'm sorry.
Uh-oh. Let's just get out of here. This is not really happening.
Hello, baby.
God, you look awful. What happened to you?
I was nearly hung. I got into a fight with a psychotic albino. I ate a cockroach, my best friend disappeared, and then I'm nearly assassinated by a runaway elevator. Anyone can have an off night. This is fantastic!
Vamp, a comedy with bite. And of course, Grace Jones.
Hello and welcome to another episode of It Could Have Been a Classic. And this week we're going to be covering Vamp, a 1986 movie directed by Richard Wenk. Not Richard Wank, Richard Wenk. God, that were a bad one, that war, wasn't it? So we're going to be talking about, like, because it's been Halloween, and I bought Vamp from Arrow on Blu-ray, which I was totally impressed with the extras. But we're going to sort of like look at vampires and where it went. For me, I could be wrong, but the 80s definitely defined the vampire for me with films like Lost Boys, Fright Night 1 and 2, and of course, one of the weirdest vampire films of all is the delectable goddess Grace Jones playing Katrina, the Vamp. So, Vamp is an interesting one, like Fright Night. You know where you're going with it, and I'm a massive fan of Fright Night. I'm not really sort of a horror fanatic, but I do like sort of like these type of movies from the 80s, you know, like Fright Night, and I do love Fright Night too, and I am going to cover Fright Night too because it just never got the credit it deserved, really, you know, because I thought the sequel stood up to the first one, even though it were Jerry Dandridge's sister. But Vamp, now this is a weird one. It's basically frat boys meet strippers, meet gangs, and vampires, you know. And I think a lot of people took a lot of stuff from this movie, you know. And, well, basically, two college students, Keith and AJ, want to hire a stripper to buy their way into a campus fraternity. They borrow a Cadillac from lonely rich student Duncan, who insists on coming with them to scope out strip clubs in a nearby city. The three boys find themselves at a club in a shady part of town, and after being impressed by a surreal artistic stripper, Katrina, AJ visits her dressing room and he ends up like sucking his blood, and you know, he becomes a vampire. Keith becomes concerned that his friend's delayed. The police turn up, they can't find his friend. Loads of weird things are happening. And basically, that's the night in this light. It's got a bit of a feel of Warriors, and some of the music as well reminds me of Big Trouble in Little China. You know, some of the background music, just bits, and you've got the albino gang, which is just hilarious. And the lighting for this film and the smoke, it's just something really about this movie, which I just adore. So they're getting on the night, and all these things are happening. Then the delectable DD Pfeiffer turns up, and his mate, Keith, she keeps saying him, "Don't you recognize me?" He's going, "Well, who are you?" And she's human, and everybody else in this part of town, because when they go into this part of town, they nearly hit a car and spin round for about 4 minutes in the car. It's just spinning round. And then they end up in this weird part of town because they've seen this advert, the After Dark Club.
Welcome to the After Dark Club.
Gentlemen, I give you Katrina.
Where the star attraction is a 2,000-year-old vampire. Grace Jones, Vamp, a frightening comedy.
Look, no thanks.
Rated R.
So there's a lot of running about, and AJ's disappeared. He keeps outside. He ends up outside the club, and everybody in there's a vampire except this waitress, DD Pfeiffer, who recognizes him from Spin the Bottle years ago. And he's outside. He sees bodies being dumped, and bin men just pick them up. And there's this other vampire that goes on about how he wants a classy club and he wants to go to Vegas. But Katrina, Grace Jones, she's in charge. But it seems like a lot of this part of town that's quite dodgy. Even police don't like going down there. It's full of vampires. Well, there's an incident at the beginning of the film where you meet this albino gang, and they're all albinos. I'm not making it. The actor actually who plays the albino, he's been in loads of movies back in the 80s. He always played a villain. And they're chasing him around and all this, and they shove him down sewers. And this is where he bumps into a vampire eating a rat. I mean, come on now, by this time there's something going on. Now, I did find the rich kid, Duncan, who had no friends. He were buying everybody. They used him to get the car, for his car, to get to this like club, so they can get the stripper back, so they get into a better frat house. I found that he was underused because I thought he might have been like the funny one, you know, really quite funny. Keith's character, he's not like as outlandish as AJ. AJ's like, he's like the, you know, he can pull women and he can stand up for himself. He's quite cool. You never touch his shirt. And Keith's sort of like his best mate, but he sort of comes into it because when his mate turns into a vampire, because he thinks he's dead, then his mate turns up. And there's a great scene where he's in like a trash thing and he sees his mate's body in there, and then later on, after police have been, he bumps into his mate again and he's alive, and he tells him, he says, look, I'm a vampire, man.
Yeah? Why don't we go home? We'll call the doctors. You don't get it, do you? Home is 1,000,000 miles away from me now. Home's another planet. I'm a fucking zombie now! I mean, look at me.
So they're down there. He escapes with Alison. He's lost AJ and Duncan. They get in the car and they try driving out of town. The gang rams into him, and his mate Duncan, the rich kid, who was so underused in this film because he should have been like the comedy element. He was at the beginning, and then they just, I don't know, he just went out of it. He changed into a vampire. They got out of car, blew up, and then the gang turn up and they all get out of car. They do a runner, and you keep seeing this little girl around town. And obviously, she's a vampire, and these gangs say, "What gang are you meant to be?" And the little girl, she flies through air and attacks him, and they all get massacred. I mean, but with them, you do get a bit of a warrior feeling, you know, because they've got a nurse and all that, and they're being chased around. And again, that awesome music is in the background. So they end up in sewers, and they get lost, and they end up in the crypt where they're all sleeping, and you get to see like a mummy thing. So that's where Katrina sleeps. She's like 2,000 years old. And they end up in there, and they knock some over, not vampires start waking up because they're all going to sleep. And the pour out petrol, there's like cans of petrol. I mean, if you're a vampire, you're not going to leave loads of petrol around in your crypt, are you? You know, and why do they sleep in crypts? If I were a vampire, I'd want somewhere cool to live. Do you know what I mean? Yet again, we are going with the laws of vampires here. They have changed it over the years. So the burnout vampires in this crypt do a runner, and guess what? He's walking along, and then Katrina appears, and this scene is really cool. It reminds me of Fright Night as well. You know, when they've got Jerry Danzy trapped and he starts knocking out glass out. Well, this, you get the same thing, but he notices after he shoots an arrow into her mouth, you know, then we get the other scene after this, which is pretty good. It's quite intense watching the whole arrow thing, you know. After like the tenseness of him firing the arrow into her mouth, and then Alison knocks her and shoves a pipe into her, Katrina pulls the arrow out and takes the pipe out, and she's laughing and all this. And he notices light in sort of like there's a bit of sunlight coming through, and it's great. He traps her in between two beams of light, and then he does the next one. And she, you know, the usual, the set on fire and start vaporize, you know, all that. And it's a great scene because I like it. Grace Jones is marvelous in this movie. She really is. And that's basically where the sort of the film, after this scene, obviously there's a bit more. Now, the question is this film a classic? I mean, there's some great one-liners in this. The soundtrack is exemplary. Now, after saying that, the other strippers in this movie, would you take back an Art Nouveau act? It's very artistic, back to a frat house. That's one question you would ask. But apparently, Grace Jones got a friend Andy Warhol, and he did some of the sets on this movie for her, like some of the artistic stuff, which is interesting. Now, Grace Jones is marvelous. Honestly, she's one of my all-time favorite performers. Anything she does, she's awesome, and she really throws herself into this character. I mean, she don't speak, she just makes noises and growls and sucks blood. But that's what you want from a bloodsucker movie. Now, the question, I mean, at the end, his mate did survive because he stuck down at sewers, and obviously Keith's got off with this Alison D.D. Pfeiffer, and she is a babe. And he's under sewers, and it's like the world's waking up I love the ending. The world's waking up, cars and all that. And like everybody's going to work in this neighborhood. The night's over. And the world is just so unaware of what has been going. All these vampires are dead now, unless there's one or two out there, except his mate. And he's going like, he said, I thought you were dead. He said, no, when I stabbed myself, it was for Mike. You know, and the comedy in this film is great. It's not quite Fright Night somehow, you know, but Fright Night, it's got it all, hasn't it? This film, it's almost there. But it is a weird vampire movie. Now, in the 70s, I grew up on Christopher Lee, and it was all the same thing, the dude in the black cape, fluttering in and getting stakes and all that, and he's after one woman. You know, you got that sort of story, and Dracula running off in horse and cart back to Bulgaria, where Transylvania, that's it. And then the 80s came, and they really did sort the vampire thing out, like with The Lost Boys, which is quite a defining movie. Now, vampires today, like Buffy were awesome, and I like Buffy because, you know, you got a lot with it. Like Spike is one of the coolest vampires of all time. And then we got that awful trilogy of movies. I forgot the name of it, but it was absolutely terrible, you know. And, you know, well, I'm a cursed vampire, but I'm in love with a human, and that, and then you get into emotional problems and how I'm not bothered about that. These people are bloodsuckers. They're gonna do what they're gonna do to survive. But the question is, would you hire Katrina as a stripper for a frat party now, or would you go for the others? That's a question I will leave to you. But this is a very unusual film, is Vamp. I really enjoyed watching this, and my distinction for me, where this is a classic, is that it is so different. You know, they tried something. Now, some of the interview stuff is sort of very interesting on this film.
Gentlemen, I give you Katrina.
Now, Jones is exploding on the movie screen, where she follows her critically acclaimed performance in A View to a Kill with the new comedy horror Vamp, where she creates the most unusual striptease vampire to ever draw blood.
I figure I might as well have a vampire that doesn't look like any other vampire, meaning she has paintings of herself all over. She's constantly changing every 5 minutes, different hair, different eye colors, just having fun, because she really is a narcissist. I'm trying to see which light I'm supposed to walk into.
Jones doesn't have any lines in Vamp, so she was forced to rely strictly on her body movements and appearance to create her character. To do so, she enlisted the aid of her friends, including New York artist Keith Haring, who painted her body in his characteristic style.
We just collaborated with all my artist friends and put an Egyptian, modern day, sort of Oriental, in some of the scenes. It's sort of like African clay, different color faces and stuff like that.
So as a film, it's really, honestly, there's a lot in this. Now, I love the light in this. It reminds me of Ghostbusters a bit as well, you know, with the fog and the light, especially how the sewers are sort of, you know, in this, like how it's all lit up with the smoke and the nightclub. You've got that feel. So 80s. It's a magical movie, is this, for a comedy horror. And that's what I mean. I have to put down, I think Tarantino, when he did his vampire movie, he took a load from this. All setting the Titty Twister Club and all that, you know, based on the After Dark Club. You know, I think he must be a fan of this movie. Now, so I'm going to put it through. Vamp, you are a classic. You've been a pleasure to watch. Now, luckily, this is on YouTube, but I bought on Blu-ray. You know, so when I see it like remastered, you know, the color was wonderful. And it's got a feel of several other movies that came out at that time. Vamp, it's got its own unique identity as a film. So I do recommend this. Give it a look, because I thoroughly enjoyed it. But I'm going to say, Vamp, you are a classic. I will be doing Doctor Who live shows, not this Sunday, but the following Sunday, because Doctor Who was rather convoluted on Sunday. And I think by next week, we'll have a better idea of what's going on. So I will be back with live streams for Doctor Who. Please check in the podcast. Sorry, I've had a few weeks off with Couldve Been a Classic. I've had to get some more stuff together. So I will be back next week with another episode. And stay safe, and I'll see you soon. Live long and prosper.
Did you ever have one of those nights?